is shining, in the midst of the darkness shining. Jesus, light of the world, shine upon us, set us free by the truth you now bring us. Shine on me, shine on me, shine, Jesus, shine, fill this land with the Father's glory. Blaze, Spirit, blaze, set our hearts on fire. Flow, river, flow, flood the nations with grace and mercy. Send forth your word, Lord, and let there be light.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us. Jim's back again, and we're going to continue on the names of God.
It's a great study, and we're glad that you've decided to join us this morning. Let's get right into it. There are three basic and most frequently occurring names of God found in the Hebrew Old Testament. They are Elohim, which means strong and faithful, the Creator God, translated as God, capital G-O-D. Then there's Adonai, which means Lord and Master. The type of name is a kingly. And then we have Lord, L-O-R-D, capital L, then small case O-R-D. And finally, Yahweh, Jehovah God, I am. He's the covenant God, the one that makes agreements. And that's L-O-R-D, all caps, L-O-R-D. Dave, take
More of a personal name.
Yeah.
The all caps, not only is it very important to know that name, but it's a very personal name of God. More descriptive of like a name that we would use today. When you think about Dave Grant, an image may pop into your head. Or when I'm at the mall and someone says, Dave Grant, it was the image that tied it to the name. Well, the image of capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D is I am. And it's different than I was, I will be. See, God, when he says I am, means since the very beginning of time and before, and after the end of time and after. He has always been and always will be. And so it's very descriptive because I'm not that way. I was born. And in this life, I'm going to die. So I was, I am, and I will be. So I'm tied to time. God is not. So we're looking at the most frequently occurring of the three that Jim just shared with you. Elohim, El is the singular, Elohim is the plural. That's the most frequently occurring name of God in the Old Testament. It may be in the New, but we're talking mainly Hebrew names here. Mm-hmm. So if it's the most frequently, we should actually get to know what that means. So that's what our lesson's about today. Now, Jim mentioned that Elohim means strong and faithful. That's what the words mean, strong and faithful. El is the strong part, and faithful is the Ohim. Ohim. I can't break them up as easy as I used to. So it was a name that was kind of put together with two characteristics. And these characteristics are important for us to know.
Because they're descriptive of God.
Well, and
this aspect of God.
Is there any time that you don't feel strong?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I like to know that my God is strong.
Even when I'm not.
Yeah.
Or maybe especially when I'm not.
I was sharing that story with you about shoveling snow. I shared it with the TV audience a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
The first snow in Escanaba and Bark River, we had over a foot of snow. I think it was 18 inches in our yard. And I was, and I didn't think I could go on anymore. I thought I was going to die, you know? And I started thinking about people who get heart attacks when they're shoveling snow. And
Serious.
I said, maybe I should stop before I have a heart attack. Anyway, God is always there where I can't be. where I fall short, where I am too weak to go on, my God can lift me up on wings like eagles. And I loved sharing that lesson with you. So I was talking to Jim about it, and that's why strong and faithful is so important to me. Elohim has become one of the most frequently used names of God in my life too, because I think of it often. And it all is because I prepared lessons for TV and for Escanaba and learned what this name means. I need that strength.
Dave, one of the best ways that we can see the strength inherent in the name Elohim is in the creation account. So let's go to Genesis chapter 1 and briefly consider some of that text in the creation account. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw that the light was good. And God separated the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. There's a couple more names for us. And there was evening and there was morning the first day. And as you go through the creation account, we see God speaking all these things into existence. He says it and it's so. He says it and it's so. And each time he says it and sees that it's so, he also sees that it's good. And we finish it up down at verses 26 and 27 when God said, "Let us make man in our image, in our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over the livestock and over all the earth and over every creeping creatures that creep on the earth." And so God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created a male and female. He created them. And God saw that everything that he had made was very good indeed.
You used the word God how many times in that text?
Oh, wow.
I mean, it's frequently occurring. So what I did, in Escanaba, I've got a little bit of flexibility with the PowerPoint. Every time the word God showed up in that, I substituted the word Elohim, because that is what that word is in the Hebrew.
Right.
And it made me more aware of the strong and faithful aspect of God's character. Because a lot of times God just seems too generic a name. And so having that Hebrew name Elohim gave me a reminder every time I read it. Oh, it's God.
Elohim did this and this and this and this, and it was all good.
So it's so important that we take these descriptions so that they can actually help us to be faithful to our God, our Elohim. And you were going to read in Psalm 33 as well, weren't you?
Yes.
That's right in the middle of your Bible, by the way.
It
Psalm
is.
33.
And we're going to look at Psalm 33, verses 6 through 11. So if you've opened up, Psalm 33, verses 6 through 11. By the word of the Lord, the heavens were made, and by the breath of his mouth, all their host. He gathers the waters of the sea as a heap. He puts the deep in storehouses. Let all the earth fear the Lord. Let all the inhabitants of the world stand in awe of him. For he spoke, and it came to be. He commanded, and it stood firm. The Lord brings the counsel of the nations to nothing. He frustrates the plans of the people. The counsels of the Lord stand forever, the plans of his heart to all generations. And blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord.
Amen. When you look at that, we have a different name, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
In Genesis 1, God had Moses use the name Elohim because he was strong enough to create everything out of nothing. Now we see David, many, many years later, David or one of the psalmists, I don't know if this one is given credit, but no, it's not. But it's a worship psalm to remind everyone of who our God Elohim is. Mm-hmm. And so in this passage, it's all caps, L-O-R-D. So if I've memorized them now, but if you would like a copy of the lesson, I can make that available to you.
That's nice. That'll
because
be helpful.
the little chart can help you with all the different names of God and what they actually mean. Well, when I look at Lord, all caps, David was using the name Yahweh, the I am, because he's many years later, but it was the God of the creation that is the God for David.
It was the Elohim, that's the Yahweh.
Yeah. So they are one and the same, but different aspects, different perspectives of God. One being ever present in the past and in the future, he's always. And one being strong, really strong. In talking about strength, and that's one of the reasons we wanted to read this, is we have examples of strength right around us today. David didn't have these examples. Solomon might have actually been able to bring some of these examples into the written word. When you look at some of the writings of Solomon, you can see evidence of his wisdom, insight. He wrote books about animals and very observing kind of man.
Biology, nature.
But here we have descriptions of the world we know. What's a genome? You know, I might find out from many different people a lot of different understandings of what a genome is. Well, I actually had to look it up. In fact, I even wrote it down so that I don't forget it. A human genome has 3 billion pairs of chromosomes, not chromosomes. The human genome is a little capsule within your cell. And in that are 23 pairs of chromosomes. Most of you have studied that in school, in your science classes. Each one of those has instruction manuals in it. Now, it's not a little book that you open up and you read the instructions. God has designed our cell structure to either release a protein, absorb a protein, send an electrical charge, stimulate this part of the body. It's just phenomenal. The human body is beyond. How many times has a doctor said, well, we're not really sure what this is. We'll have to really do some testing.
Right.
Because we are wonderfully made.
Fearfully and wonderfully made.
And so the genome is so tiny we can't see it with the naked eye. Isn't that amazing? And God is the one who created that. When he took the dust of the earth and formed a man and blew into him the breath of life, those cells, those genomes, those chromosomes, they all had little instruction manuals. So God created, and now we become a living being.
From the greatest to the least.
Yeah.
Largest to the smallest.
He is phenomenal.
Incredible.
The strong creator. That's what that name Elohim means, strong creator. Well, there's a chickadee. You've all seen chickadees, I'm sure. And I got to look at my notes too on this one. The chickadee can hide seeds for the winter because they stay up here all winter long. Well, where are they going to get food?
They're not snowbirds.
No.
They stay.
In fact, there's
like
several.
us.
Crows are not snowbirds. Nuthatches, blue jays, they're not snowbirds, so they have to hide seeds. Well, just as an example, the chickadee will have up to 200 hiding places during the winter.
How does he remember where all those are?
How does he remember? Well, there's a little instruction manual in the chickadee, too. And automatically he grows up and he learns that he's got a memory to put something there. I know where those seeds are. I know where those seeds. I can't do that. And so they did some testing to see if that was true. You know, they couldn't blindfold the chickadee. So what they did is they did a little surgery and they separated the hippocampus in his brain.
Unbelievable.
And guess what? Chickadee couldn't remember where he put his seeds. God created those little cells, those tiny little cells, so that the bird would be fed during the winter.
Wow. Take care of it.
Our God is strong, and he also created our universe. And Antares is one of the biggest stars. It's the 15th largest star, according to scientists. I don't know that for a fact. I have to rely on what they've done in research and study. And it is so bright we can actually see it from Earth. And yet it's 100 light years away, I believe. Let me just take a look, because that's important. Oh, I don't have it on there.
It's a long, long ways.
You know what a light year is? For if you shine a flashlight, it's going to take 100 years to get to that spot.
Wow.
So you can see that flashlight. I turn it on, 100 years later, you might be able to see it.
Whereas here it's instantaneous.
Yeah. So it is so far away, and yet we can see it because God is bigger than all of that. He is the strong creator, from the biggest to the smallest. In fact, when we think about the Apostle Paul in the New Testament, he wanted to introduce God, the strong and faithful creator, to the people who didn't know him. They believed in all kinds of little gods with a small g. Well, if you're going on a trip, this is the God that you need to pray to. And if you're going to prepare a meal, this is the God you should pray to. And he said, I want to introduce him to the real God, Elohim. And so he said, God is near each one of us at all times. He is everywhere. And he may be on the other side of the world, but he's also here with me because our God is in and through and full. And so the God who made us is near all of us. So that just gives us a little understanding of Elohim as being the strong creator. But there's also an aspect of faithfulness. See, it's not just El, meaning God. It's Elohim. It means he's a faithful creator. So when he wrote those little instruction manuals, he meant for them to be followed. And we don't have anything to say about it. It just, if you're born to a man who might be a little bit bigger in the girth, there's a good chance you might be born with a little bit bigger girth. My dad, as he got older, got a little bit wider in here. Guess what? I did too, and so did my brother. That's part of my gene structure. That's the instruction manual. Now, did God want me to be bigger around here? Not necessarily. But if I don't eat right, I'm going to get bigger around there because my gene structure is part of who I am. So I do work at it. I try to keep it down a little bit. Make sure you tell my wife if you see her that I'm working real hard.
So the genomes and the stars and the chickadees and all these different things that are involved. You mentioned Paul, and I just wanted to go there and read a little bit about that in Acts chapter 17 because this is so important. This is kind of like ties it into why it's so important to us here and now, just as it was to them. Paul says, as I passed along and observed the objects of your worship, I found also an altar with this inscription, to the unknown God. And that's the one he's going to talk about. And that's the one we're talking about here this morning. What therefore you worship as unknown, this I proclaim to you, the God who made the world and everything in it, being Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in temples made by man, nor is he served by human hands as if he needed anything. Since he himself gives life to all, breath and everything, and he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods in the boundaries of their dwelling place, that they should seek God, and perhaps feel their way toward him, and find him. Yet he is actually not far from each one of us, for in him we live and move and have our very beings. So there he is.
Yeah, I love that passage. It's one of my favorites because how creative. The Spirit of God is directing Paul. Mm-hmm. How creative a way to introduce God, but to acknowledge you've got lots of gods, but I've got the God who created all of us.
Yes.
Well, that's Elohim, the strong and faithful creator. And one of the things that, and I'm going to ask Jim if you'll go to Numbers 23.
Got it.
I just want to give you a little background on what he's going to read, because he's only going to read a verse. We can't read the whole chapter, or 3 chapters that talks about it. But Balaam was a prophet. Okay, and a prophet is one who speaks for another and proclaims the word. Well, Balak, there's a Barak in there too, but Balak was a king who wanted to hurt the Israelites. So he wanted to hire Balaam, a prophet, to curse the Israelites. And he said, well, I could get paid, so if I do this, but then I'd be going against the almighty Elohim. And so he was fumbling around. Finally, he decided to go, and he was going to curse the Israelites.
Do the wrong thing.
Do the wrong thing. And the donkey that he was riding on stopped. Wouldn't go any further. So Balaam took like a 2x4, but a stick, and started beating on the donkey.
To go.
You got to go. Move, move, move. The donkey wouldn't go. And he kept beating on him. He said, why are you beating on me? And this is a paraphrase. Don't you see the angel standing in the way with those swords? He doesn't want us to go any farther. So God was stopping him from going. That's so important. Is our strong and faithful Creator in this story reveals himself. Not through a talking donkey, but when Balaam is allowed to continue on his journey, that's where we get to what Jim's going to read. God actually, even though he intended to curse Israel, God reveals himself through his message. That's beautiful. God has control. He's the one who wrote the instruction manuals in every one of us. So, why don't you read that verse for us?
It almost reminds me of the Apostle Paul heading on his way to go persecute more Christians in Damascus, and the light, and it's like he got hit by a 2x4 himself,
right.
And so that he could see who God was and what he was supposed to be doing. Yeah. Here we are in Numbers chapter 23 and verse 19. God is not man that he should lie, or son of man that he should change his mind. Has he said, and will he not do it? Or has he spoken, and will he not fulfill it? We can count on him, can't we?
Definitely. And that's God speaking through the voice box of Balaam. He wanted to curse the Israelites, but rather God was exalted in his message. God keeps his word. God, if he says it, he'll do it. That's the faithfulness that we're talking about here. In fact, if you want to look at that faithfulness a little bit more, we have several examples of faithfulness.
I got one in Genesis 7 that we talked about.
Yeah, Genesis 7:23 through 8:1.
It's a bit of a read, but let's do it. Genesis 7:23 through 8:1. He blotted out every living thing that was on the face of the ground. This is the account of Noah and the flood. He blotted out every living thing that was on the face of the ground, man and animals, and creeping things and birds of the heathens, the heavens rather. They were blotted out from the earth. Only Noah was left, and those who were with him in the ark. And the waters prevailed on the earth 150 days. Here it is now. But God remembered Noah and all the beasts and all the livestock that were with him in the ark. And God made a wind blow over the earth, and the waters subsided. The fountains of the deep and the windows of the heavens were closed, and the rain from the heavens was restrained, and the waters receded from the earth continually. At the end of 150 days, the waters had abated.
So we have God remembering Noah and his family in the ark. Now, don't forget that remembered is a much bigger word than what we use in our modern culture.
For sure.
If I remember something, it's because I forgot it in our culture. Well, I forgot to do that. So I remembered it, and then I did it. With God, remembered is much bigger. It wasn't that he had forgotten about Noah and the animals in the ark. It's that he brought it to the forefront and said it's time to deal with it. It's time to take care of this. So the time had reached its fulfillment that he wanted the water on the earth.
That's important because sometimes we think God has forgot.
Yeah, we actually use that language.
Yeah, because we don't understand what's really happening and taking place in the complete picture. And so we're going, oh, he must have forgot. But he never forgets. Just because it says he remembers doesn't mean he forgot.
Again, remember, that word remember means much more than just your memory.
The way we look at it.
Remembered means to bring it and deal with it. And it came up with the Israelites in slavery. God remembered his promise to the Israelites. It was time to put it on the table and deal with it. 400 years had passed. So, and if you go to the Hebrew dictionaries and the Hebrew language, you'll understand that word means to bring it to the forefront, to deal with it. It's not necessarily a simple little word like we use. So, let me share these examples of faithfulness. I'm going to ask you some rhetorical questions. And Jim may even answer for you if you're really good. Did Elohim, strong and faithful creator, did he keep his promise to Noah?
Why, yes, he did. By his words, did the seasons not continue? They did. Seed time and harvest continued. As long as the earth endures, yes.
So, did you plant a garden this past year? Are you going to plant one when the snow's gone this year? Well, how is it that God is so faithful that even from the time of Noah, he's still keeping his promise by allowing every year for us to grow things so that we can sustain us?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, he kept his promise. Did Elohim, the strong and faithful creator, keep his promise to Abraham?
Why, yes, all nations on the earth will be blessed through Abraham's seed, even all the way to Jesus the Christ, who is our Savior.
And were you not saved by the Jesus that lived 200 years ago?
2,000 years ago.
By his name, we are saved today.
Yes.
Jesus saves. Now, did Elohim keep his promise to Israel?
Yes, the word of Elohim was clear about obedience. What happened to Jerusalem?
When God's word clearly says this is how you should live, treat one another with respect, follow the ways of your Creator, and they don't, they disregard him and they turn away from him, there is going to be punishment. There's going to be consequences of not following the one who put everything in order. The reason our world is in chaos is because people are not following Elohim.
And haven't for generations.
No, and it seems like it gets worse every year.
Keeps
But
piling up.
There's hope. There's hope. Yeah, it is piling up. Romans chapter 1, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
God has stored up his wrath against disobedience and evil. Are you bothered when someone does something wrong and they're not punished? I know I am. You know, if there's somebody that is a bully on the highway, I want state trooper to come by. Yeah, I want him punished. Well, God knows, and we're part of his character. We have to stop there, Jim.
Wow, that time went by fast.
It sure did. So we're going to be back next week to continue our study, and I hope you'll join us. We have our Bible course, a quick picture of the 7 booklets. If you want to take this in your home, I'll send you the first booklet. If you need a Bible, we have the hardcover English Standard Version, and I'll send you one free of charge. Write to me if you want to take the Bible or take the course, get a Bible, or both. And that's Church of Christ, P.O. Box 751 in Escanaba, Michigan, 49829. Or go on our webpage and you might be in for a surprise. You'll see that you can even watch this program again.
LetTheBibleSpeak.net, and we look forward to continuing our study on the names of God and what they mean to us next week at the same time. We thank you for tuning in today. We look forward to seeing you then. Until then, you take care, and God bless.
God bless.
The Father's glory blaze, Spirit blaze, set our hearts on fire. Flow, river, flow, flood the nations with grace and mercy. Send